the Targums. See also page 185. These are the translations of the Bible or parts of the Bible into Aramaic. They must be reckoned as belonging to the rabbinic literature because, where they offer interpretation, as every translation, even the most literal, must do to some extent, they do so within the rabbinic tradition. The Targums, like other rabbinic literature, began orally and were gradually reduced to writing, with many revisions, before reaching a final form. The original context of the Targum was a synagogue, or the temple, where the reading from the Torah and prophets on Sabbaths and festivals was orally translated into Aramaic by an interpreter, meturgeman, every 3 verses for the benefit of the people who mostly did not understand Hebrew. This practice began probably in the 1st century BC, as the translation became standardized under the supervision of the rabbis. They began to take shape in writing. The Targums fall into 2 main categories. The official Targums, known as Onkelos on the Torah and Jonathan on the prophets, and the unofficial Targums, written in the Galilean dialect of Aramaic. So someone said to us in the comments long ago, there is no such thing as Aramaic. There never was a language called Aramaic or Galilean Aramaic. There you go. You've just been debunked. The unofficial Targums written in a Galilean dialect of Aramaic, known as the Palestinian Targums. The official Targums are much more literal than the Palestinian Targums. Much controversy has raged about which of these 2 categories is of the earlier date. The influential view of Khaled that the Palestinian Targums are earlier and that the official Targums are later and Babylonian origin has become doubtful because of the work of Kutzka, Kaufman and Tal. It seems probable now that the official Targums are the earlier and are also Palestinian, with only superficial Babylonian colouring later. Accordingly, in this volume, the extracts given are primarily from the official Targums, with reference to the Palestinian Targums where relevant. The Targums give very valuable evidence of rabbinic Judaism in the 1st century AD, especially where they retain vestiges of earlier halakha and haggadah. The main influence on them, however, has been that of the rabbis of the 2nd century AD, whose views were later collected in the Mishnah and Midrashim. The Mishnah. This is the most important halakhic work of our period. It is the culmination of an effort beginning at Jabneh after the destruction of the temple in AD 70, to collate the laws by pooling all existing customs and traditions. Thus, for example, laws relating to the administration of the temple and its sacrifices were contributed by surviving priests who had taken part in the temple service. Laws relating to the administration of justice were contributed by judges, and laws relating to the practices of the table fellowships by members of them. There were probably some written collections of laws even at this time. As time went on, a plan for the classification of all laws under 6 main headings emerged, and collections were made attempting to include all laws under these 6 titles. These finally became the 6 orders, Sedarim, of the Mishnah, the collection which subsumed and superseded all the previous collections. The orders of the Mishnah are seeds, appointed time, woman, damages, holiness and purities. See page 49. The final editor of the Mishnah in these orders is regarded by tradition as Rabbi Judah the Prince, who completed his work of editorship around AD 200. The text of the Mishnah as we have it, however, has been affected by later editors, especially the Amoraim, or authorities of the Talmud, who sometimes inserted emendations into the text. They probably added to it, put extra bits and pieces in there. The earliest manuscripts of the Mishnah, including the Parma manuscript, are no earlier than the 13th century, since the systematic destruction of Jewish holy writings formed part of Christian persecution. Earlier than this, however, are the texts of the Mishnah embedded in manuscripts of the Palestinian and Babylonian Talmuds. dated to the 12th century. Some much earlier readings have been obtained from fragments found in the Cairo Geniza. See the glossary. It is clear that the Mishnah sets out to be a law manual, thus excluding as far as possible non-legal material, Haggadah, or devotional material. Yet it was found impossible to exclude such material completely. Sometimes Haggadah creeps in as illustration of a legal topic. See, for example, the story about Honi the Sukumaker, page 92. Sometimes it is used to round off a topic at the end of a chapter, tractate, or order. The most conspicuous intrusion of Haggadah, however, is the presence of a whole Haggadic tractate, that of Abot, which is included in the order of damages. This is a collection of ethical sayings belonging to the genre of wisdom literature rather than to halakha. It was evidently felt that even though the Mishnah was primarily a law manual, it was necessary to include within it something of the background of religious and ethical emotion, which informed Rabbinic Judaism and gave rise to the proliferation of laws by which the covenant community could be implemented on earth. Even Abot, however, is far from encompassing the full range of concepts found in the Haggadah of the Midrash and Talmud. Abot restricts itself mainly to the ethic surrounding the rabbinic emphasis on the religious duty of study and education. This is the ethic appropriate to the Mishnah, which comprises the aspect of rabbinic Judaism demanding hard intellectual application. Abot is unique in that it is a treatise on education which not only enjoins study and teachings as a feature of the religious life, but seeks to isolate the moral and spiritual characteristics necessary for good teaching and good studying. Another apparently anomalous tractate of the Mishnah is Eduyot, Testimonies. This seems to be the only surviving example of a halakhic genre in which the laws are arranged not under topics but under the names of teachers who testified to them. The laws in Eduyot are found elsewhere. Eduyot are found elsewhere in the Mishnah or under topics. So it is a problem why this tractate was included. The tractate does not appear to be earlier than the rest of the Mishnah. Other anomalies can be observed in the system of classification itself. Thus, it is a little difficult to see why the tractate Berakot, blessings, which deals with the liturgy, is included in the order of Zeraim, seeds, which deals with agricultural laws. Some classifications are tenuous. For example, the tractate Nidarim, vows, is included in the order Nasim, women, only because certain vows made by women can be annulled by their husbands. They can be completely squished, made worthless, right, by their husbands, and thus lead also to the inclusion of the tractate Nazir, the Nazarite, the inclusion of Abot in the order Nezikin. Damages is hard to explain. Such anomalies, however, can be found in every code of law because of the difficulties of categorization. The term Mishnah itself means literally repetition, an allusion to the practice of learning the laws and memorizing them by a process of repetition. So you're learning them over and over and over and over again. Okay, so it sticks in your mind, your subconscious, right? And you can recall them, easily because you know it, right? You instinctively know it. This brings out the point made earlier that the field of halakha was the main focus of the duty of Talmud Torah, and it was here that efforts were directed to ensure that the student had a complete grasp and total recall of the whole body of learning, so that he could give quick decisions if required. If somebody asks him a question, right, he can snap, give them the answer, right? The ethic here is similar to that required of medical practitioners today, whose training is directed towards memorization of all vital information, so that time will not be lost in an emergency by consulting books. So that's when you get hospitalized, you've got a major injury, and being rushed in there. You see on these movies, all that sort of stuff, that these doctors, etc., saying, right, blah, 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 blah. And this nurse is like, basically saying what's wrong with the person, and the doctor's like, blah, 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 give me some of this, give me, da, 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 all that sort of stuff, right? Okay, because they know exactly what to do, what to prescribe, right? And so forth. It's all up on the top of their head. They just have to recall it. Okay. In the field of Haggadah, such memorization was not required, since here the need was not for practical mastery, but for the imbibing of inspiration and edification. The Mishnah of Rabbi Judah the Prince became known as the Mishnah par excellence. So it's like the best, right? It's perfect, excellent. Yeah? But in fact, the name Mishnah was given to all compilations of a similar kind, except that Tosefta, which means addition. For example, addition to the Mishnah of Rabbi Judah the Prince. We know of other compilations called Mishnah, such as the Mishnah of Rabbi Akiva, but none of them has survived. So the position of nomenclature is similar to the case of the term Midrash. The genre of collections of halakha in classified form is called Mishnah. A work exemplifying this form is called a Mishnah, and a pericope from such a work is called a Mishnah. There is no such thing as oral Mishnah, because Mishnah is by definition is one of the modes by which oral Torah was put into writing, a point somewhat obscured by the fact that even though the Mishnah was in writing, it was a practice to learn it by heart, a practice common. So you repeat it over and over and over and over again, so you know it and you can repeat it, recite it. Common in Jewish, a practice common in Jewish academics, yeshivot, down to the present day. Modern times. The question may be asked, what exactly was the purpose of the Mishnah? Why does it include certain things and omit others, or leave others out? Is it intended as a practical guide to conduct for Jews living in the period following the two national disasters, the destruction of the temple and the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolution? Yeah, that's the guy, Simon Bar Kokhba. He was the zealot's messiah. He helped try to overthrow the Romans, but the Romans chased him to some sort of valley. They got trapped there, the others took off, whatever, and he ended up getting martyred, right? He called it from martyrdom. So it was the nation, the zealots were upset because, oh no, they've killed our saviour, the one who's going to lead us to liberation from the Romans, and they awaited another one like him. Okay, but when Christ came, he wasn't the replacement. He wasn't the one that was going to come with a sword and rise up the nation and these zealots, whatever, and get them to defeat the Romans and kick them out and then sit on the throne as king of Israel, right? He had a very different purpose. Okay. Okay, so why does the Mishnah include certain things and omit others? Is it intended as a practical guide to conduct for Jews living in the period following the two national disasters, the destruction of the temple and the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt? Or is it, on the contrary, intended to provide a nostalgic picture of the Jewish religious polity that had ceased to exist? On the whole, we have to reply that the Mishnah is a picture of a functioning Jewish state in that particular time, right? Rather than a guide to living in a world where the Jewish state has ceased to operate. In a world of disintegration, the Mishnah gathers together the pieces and provides a blueprint for reconstruction. Thus, the Mishnah comprises a tremendous act of faith in the eventual restoration of the Jewish Commonwealth, and in preparation for this event makes ready the entire constitution by which it will be set up. This is certainly an element of nostalgia here, but much more evident is a calm confidence that this is a true state of affairs which has only been temporarily interrupted. Thus, the Mishnah in the tractate Sanhedrin describes the rights, duties and limits of power of the Jewish monarchy, or of the supreme judiciary body, the Sanhedrin, completely ignoring the fact that these arms of the state had ceased to exist. Moreover, the detailed procedure of the temple, which actually lay in ruins, is described, even down to the casting of lots by a priest for the performing of sacrifices, or the description of the various chambers, such as the wood chamber, the wheel chamber, and the chamber of hewn stone. The tractate Yoma, about the ritual of the Day of Atonement, says nothing about how this solemn day was observed in the synagogues in the days of the rabbis of Mishnaic times. Instead, it describes the full ritual of the temple. One whole tractate, Ḥakamim, is devoted to curious mathematical problems arising from bird sacrifices. To study such a tractate was an academic exercise, but one which focused the mind on the messianic hope, or the hope of a forthcoming Messiah. And they're not talking about Christ. For with the restoration of the temple, these problems would become practical. We don't feel that they were talking about the Christ, right? Jesus the Messiah. On the other hand, much of the Mishnah was of practical importance even in conditions of political powerlessness. Jewish courts were given certain powers even by alien rulers. Doesn't mean aliens from outer space or extraterrestrials. It means foreign rulers, Gentiles, etc., Romans, Greeks, etc. And the laws outlined in the order of damages, including laws of compensation for injuries to persons or property, were administered and applied not only in the Mishnaic period but throughout the Middle Ages. Laws concerning charity or other deeds of loving kindness did not require a functioning state or courts of law for their continuance, but only personal piety fostered by the study of the Mishnah. Most of the laws of the Sabbaths and festivals could be observed in the home or the synagogue, even in the absence of a temple, and the Mishnah tractates on these topics continued to be of practical importance. We conclude then that the Mishnah was not intended primarily as a practical manual of Jewish law and practice, though parts of it certainly served this function. The Mishnah's main aim was political, to prevent the Jews from sinking into the mentality of a defeated people, with horizons bounded by the positions assigned to them in the Roman Empire. Jews studying the Mishnah were continually reminded that they were the heirs, the heads, the chiefs of a great polity. They were the chosen, right? They were the selected by God, with a legal system of its own, and that their subjection to the polity and law of Rome was merely temporary. The Mishnah indeed has nothing to say about day-to-day politics or even great contemporary events, but takes a long-term view, thus removing itself not only from contemporary politics, but also from short-term apocalyptic hopes. It quietly outlines a polity that had never quite existed in the past, for all attempts to implement it had fallen short, but would come into existence in the indefinite future. Meanwhile, life was to be lived as best a subject people might live it in the Roman Empire, or under the Roman rule, right? Yet to make the best of life, okay? Yet to survive, okay? In Judaism, politics and religion were inextricably entwined. Political liberation had been one of the great religious themes of Judaism ever since the liberation from Egypt. However, the Mishnah does not state its own aims, and all attempts to see it as a whole have to go beyond what is on the printed page. The reticence, pretty sure that's how you say that word. We don't think it's reticence, we'll say, of the Mishnah arises from the fact that, whether concerned with the past, the present, or the future, it is primarily a book of law. It does not attempt to comprehend the full range of rabbinic thought and feeling. It gives an account of the current state of the halakha, even on matters beyond practical implementation. But it eschews, as far as it can, the Haggadah, which defies codification. Yet the Mishnah assumes the full range of Haggadic ideas and makes no sense without them. The Mishnah is written in a very succinct and technical style, so that the literal translation is very often unintelligible. Its style is full of mnemonic features and is best characterized by saying that it is written in such a way as to facilitate memorization by the kind of reader who is familiar with its technical vocabulary and does not need elementary explanations. There is evidence that their class of persons called Tanaim, or repeaters, not to be confused with the more familiar use of the word Tanaim, meaning authorities of the Mishnaic period, who made it their business, either professionally or as a service to the community, to memorize the whole Mishnah and would assist the discourses of the rabbi by acting as a kind of human concordance. So they're like a reference, right? So anyone could come to them, or they could come to them and say, okay, and they'd say, yeah, in reply, according to what they had memorized. from their study.